I'm very happy in the first place this morning to be able to welcome you, Tom Skinner, to the Augsburg community and to the library community which we're part of. A good number of us have been hoping for Mr. Skinner's coming for quite some time, and for several months now have been anticipating it, not only at the time but at prayer as well. I'm not going to make a lengthy introduction to Mr. Skinner this morning. Should I start? I'm not going to make a lengthy introduction this morning of Mr. Skinner. That would be very difficult in terms of where to begin and where to stop. But I think that most of us are well aware of his fame as an author, as a speaker, and most of all, as an evangelist. The one thing I am convinced of, and that is, as a brochure on his ministry says, God is doing a new thing through Tom Skinner. And it's my hope and my prayer, and I hope yours, that during these days that he's with us, a new thing will happen here too. So we welcome you, Mr. Skinner, to our campus, to this assembly this morning, and to the days ahead.
Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to say that I'm very happy to be at Augsburg College, intellectual center of Minneapolis. Religious stalwart of the Lutheran Church. And to have this opportunity to share this week with you, I've been looking forward to it with real anticipation. I'm hoping that what happens in these sessions in the morning will just stimulate our thinking, and that our rap sessions will be when we can really get down to it. I feel awkward up here because I'm kind of high up, and I wish there was some kind of way I could get down so we could be part of this whole thing together. But you'll understand that even though I'm up here, I don't feel this way. And no, I really would like us to get close together, but we'll do that in the rap sessions afterwards. I think it becomes necessary for me to kind of put in perspective what we're going to be trying to do this week. By clarifying two things, that you're going to find me using two words quite often. One word is the word revolution, the other word is the word radical. During the course of the week, some of your parents will be coming here because they too are disturbed about those two words. They're not sure whether their kids are being exposed to some kind of raving, rampaging, militant, black radical who's out to burn Augsburg College down. It was for this reason this morning that I tried to find the most conservative duds I could to put on so that I could relieve you of any feeling that perhaps I was out to do you in. So I tried to look as much like the system as possible this morning so that you'll understand that I really do like you. Some of my best friends are college students. The word revolution means to take an existing situation which is proved to be unworkable, archaic, impractical, out of date. You do away with it and you replace it with something that works. That is the meaning of revolution, to change. To change. A great number of people, when they hear the word revolution, they think of a bunch of guerrillas running through the street with machine guns going to mow everybody down. Or when they hear the word radical, they think of a bunch of Russians rolling their tanks down the street, and that these folks must sit in their windows with their pre-World War I guns ready to pick them off. But the word radical is taken from the Greek word radikai, which means to get to the root of. Those of you who are students of mathematics know that when we talk about the radikai of a number, we're talking about the square root of a number. A radical is a person who gets to the root of things. A radical says you cannot cure a sick tree by shaking off dead leaves. You must deal with the root of the tree. A radical says you cannot get rid of a man's virus by blowing his nose. You must deal with his virus. A A radical is a person who gets to the root causes of things. He does not deal with symptoms, he deals with diseases. The people who are so anti-radical and anti-revolutionary are the people who will never bring about effective changes because they don't deal with gut issues. They don't deal with where things really are. They deal in externals. They assume that the length of a person's hair, the fact that he does or does not have a beard has something to do with his character. They believe that the way a person dresses has something to do with whether they're American or un-American, whatever that means. A radical says no. The radical says, I want to get to where the cat really is at. Because there are a whole lot of people who look straight. They have crew cuts, clean shaven, they're all American type, but underneath they are vicious anarchists. There are other people who look like tremendous nonconformists, but underneath they're terrible conformists. A man cannot be judged by his appearance, what he looks like, neither can he be judged by his rhetoric. You've got to get to where he's really hurting and where he's really living, and that's what a radical is all about. So I make no bones about it. I am a revolutionary. I am out to see changes occur. I am a radical. I believe in getting to the root of things. My point of reference is Jesus Christ, the greatest, most forceful, radical, revolutionary to ever live. And that is what I'm going to be dealing with in these 3 days. I spent a long time trying to come to grips with my doubts. Until one day it dawned on me that I'd better come to grips with what I believe. I have since moved from the agony of trying to deal with questions that I cannot answer to the agony of trying to deal with answers that I cannot escape. And it's been a great relief. If we're going to deal with answers that we cannot escape, we must come to grips with what the questions are. What are the issues today? What are the questions that you and I have to deal with if we're going to talk about truly becoming involved in changing the world and making a difference in the kind of messed up society in which we live? And that is what I want to deal with. I hope that you do not spend all of your time trying to fit me into some kind of category. Because I'm not a conservative, I'm not a liberal, I'm not a left-winger or a right-winger. You will not be able to fit me into any category. I am simply a follower of Jesus Christ who is seeking to find out what a Christian lifestyle is all about in the kind of messed up society in which we live. But do not attempt to fit me into a conservative bag or liberal bag or left-wing bag or right-wing bag. Don't try to decide whether I'm a militant or an Uncle Tom or an Oreo. You will have problems. Because I'm none of that. I'm simply a lover of Jesus, who's seeking to find out what it means to be his follower in today's society. Now the question is, what are the issues of our time? It seems to me that if we're talking about making valid changes in the world in which we live, we're talking about dealing with 3 main issues. The first issue is the issue of coming to grips with who I am. Coming to grips with my identity crisis. Solving the problem of who in the world is Tom Skinner and what is he all about. Who are you? And what are you all about? And if you listen very closely to the pop music of our generation, and you can listen to almost anybody on the contemporary scene, whether you're listening to the Temptations, or Aretha Franklin, Roberta Flack, Lou Rawls, or even some of the people who moved out of the more contemporary time, but recent, Simon Garfunkel, Rolling Stones, all of them were asking the same question. Now, of course, being spiritual kids, I know you don't listen to any of them, so let me tell you what they're saying. Trying to get it together. Trying to discover what my bag is. When I'm down and out, when I'm on the street, who's going to bridge me over troubled water? And the whole sum of the society in which we live has been one great movement of people trying to come to grips with who in the world we are. is my bag? What is my thing? Who am I? Why am I here? What is life really all about? So the kid goes to his old man and he says, Dad, straight from the shoulders, I want the facts of life. What's it all about? Well, son, it's all about going to school and getting an education. And what for, Dad? I said, son, you'll be able to get a better job and make more money. I said, but why, Dad? Well, so son, you'll be able to buy a better home in a better neighborhood. Throw in a swimming pool, at least 3 cars in the garage, extra boat pool around the summer, trip to Europe once a year. You'll make the proper investments in the right stocks, securities, and bonds. I said, but why, Dad? Well, so when you retire, son, you'll be able to retire comfortably. Yeah, but what for, Dad? So when you die, son, you'll leave an estate. That's what it's all about, son. As cynical as that may sound, you think about it. What are you going to school for? If it isn't for the purpose of getting an education, to get a better job, to make more money, to make the proper investments, to retire comfortably so you can die and leave something. That is the reason we have been motivated that college education is what you got to get if you are going to make it. And making it means what? Greed. It means materialism. It means ownership. It means possession. And even the dumb government commercials that try to challenge young people to stay in high school. What's the argument? Stay in high school because those who graduate from high school make $50 a week more than those who don't. Beautiful incentive. Because that's the way, that determines who we are. The name of the game is greed. For the first time in our generation, a small group of people are standing up and saying, if that's all there is to it, then take it and hang it on your nose. But immediately, they are considered to be radical. There's something wrong with those kind of people. There's something wrong with a guy who says money is not the most important thing. And I refuse to go to school to get a better education, to get a better job, to make more money, to make the proper investments, to retire comfortably and die and leave something. I refuse to throw that bag, and right away, he's radical. Must be inspired by the communists. Because he doesn't want to play that game. What's it all about for you, friend? I mean, what's it really all about? It is summed up admirably in the words of our friend Alfred, who after one bed experience and another, one trip out after another, one bottle after another, wakes up one morning and looks himself square in the mirror in a drunken stupor, and he says, what's it all about? Who's going to sort it out, Alfred? What's the name of the game? Who's going to help you get it together? What is it really all about? Why are you alive? You can speak to any athlete. No team will go out on the gymnasium floor or a football field. No prize fighter will go out in the ring to fight without a game plan, without some kind of fight strategy. No pilot will take a plane up into the air without some kind of flight plan. And yet most people live their lives 70, 60 years with no game plan, no strategy, no purpose, no reason. You see, how you define yourself will have a lot to do with how you live. But most of us live with no frame of reference. We just kind of let things happen rather than make things happen. And someone says there are a few people who make things happen, but many people who watch things happen, and the overwhelming majority who have no idea what has happened. Because only a few people make things happen. And the people who make things happen are people who know who they are. Who are you? Who are you really? If I came to you and said, look, man, tell me who you are, you will tell me your name, and my response will be, well, look, I'm happy that you got a name, but that doesn't tell me who you are. You say, well, you give me your address, and I'm glad you have a place to live, but that doesn't tell me who you are. And just try this out on the side. Without telling me your name, without telling me your address, without telling me what you do, without telling me your parents' name, who are you? Without telling me anything about your parents, without telling me anything about where you live, and without telling me anything about what you do, and without telling me your name, who are you? Who are you really? We got to grapple with that issue. Because it's almost no way you can talk about accomplishing anything. There's no way you can talk about goals. There's no way you can talk about doing anything to change this messed up society until you and I come to grips with who we are. And one of the things that disturbed me to no end was I was one of these cats who was out trying to change the system until I discovered I couldn't possibly become engaged in changing the system until I dealt with Tom Skinner's messed up self. So I came to grips with who I am. The great tragedy of most of our searches for identity is that we allow other people to determine or define who we are. Very few of us sit down and define ourselves, which makes for the worst form of oppression, because the person who is allowed to define who you are can press you into their mold. And they oppress you and use you to serve their ends because they have defined you. The second issue, once I find out who I am, is the issue of community. Community. Identity is the first issue. The second issue is community. Once I find out who I am, who's the cat or kitten sitting next to me, and what are they all about? And what is my response to other people? What is my relationship with other people? What is my relationship to the community right here on this campus? The great tragedy is that here we are, 3/4 of the way through the 20th century, and we still can't get along with each other. Not really. Of course, what many of us call getting along is the fact that nobody's blowing things up, you know. It's like when I go to different towns and cities to speak, you know, people come up and they say, Tom Skinner, this is a nice town. We don't really have any problems here. And plus what they mean is nobody has burned anything down yet, you know. Nobody has burned any buildings. You know, nobody's shooting each other down. And they assume that since there's no war going on, we ain't got no problems. See, our dumb society only recognizes problems when we start burning the thing down. But 3/4 of the way through the 20th century, we really don't know how to relate to each other. And even on campus, the best we muster with each other is that as we pass each other in the corridor, or as we pass each other walking across campus or going in and out of class, we might muster a week. We're not really committed to each other. It never really occurs to us that there is a live, warm human being like me, and that person hurts like me. That person bleeds like me, and that person's got hang-ups and frustrations like me. That person needs me the way I need them. That never hit us. But we're too insecure and too immature and too hung up on ourselves to be related to each other, because we create our own world, and that world is right here, me. And if after I get through feeding me and my ego and all my needs, maybe I'll have room left for you. Maybe. But we're not committed to each other. This struck me very forcefully in my senior year in high school. Everybody goes to school with a kook, you know. And there was this guy at school who was considered the school kook, you know, just one of these goofy guys that nobody wanted to be bothered with. He'd always see me, you know, he'd see me in the corridor, you know, as we changing classes. Hey Tom, hey, wait for me, man. Where you going, man? Hey, look, you know, that English assignment, you think you can let me copy it because I didn't get a chance to copy it yesterday, man. And listen, about that history thing, you can, and when you gonna be eating lunch, I'd like to talk to you, man. And every time the guys always chase me around school, you know, and as you're walking down the corridor, all of a sudden, hey Tom, oh, man. Oh. And you wish there was some way you could get away. The cat was just plain cooked. And if you walked in the cafeteria and he was on that side of the cafeteria, you found a way to eat over there. You know, you just didn't want to be bothered. Midway through the term, he was in a terrible accident and died. I remember sitting at his funeral service, and all I could remember was that for the last 10 days of his life, I did nothing to contribute to it. The last 10 days of his life, I avoided him, disregarded him, ignored him, tried to stay away from him because I considered him to be a kook. And all he was a guy deep down within hurt who wanted somebody to say he cared. And I didn't say it. I didn't show it. I ran away from it. And you see, we bring to our academic environment all these hang-ups and frustrations where it never really occurs to us that the real reason for your being here is not just an education in the academic sense of the word, but that the greatest education you will receive here is your ability to learn how to live with people. I could care less whether you get D's or C's or B's or A's. The question is, do you know how to relate to people? Because I used to have a real problem with the kind of student at college, you know. Cat was getting straight A's and she was getting straight A's, but they were these foggy people, you know. You ever met those kind? Straight A's, academically up, but don't have the slightest idea what's going on. They got me walk around, you know, they get A's, man, because, you know, they have photographic or semi-photographic memories, and they can pick up books and memorize pages, you know, and the dumb multiple choice questions that most college campuses give you, you got a 25% chance of being right. You don't have to really be too smart, and so the guy comes out on top. But got the slightest idea what's going on, what's happening in the world. You can't discuss any issue with him, but he ain't got the slightest idea. Oh, he can quote the equations, the chemical equations backwards. But ask him about some human situation, about some human commitment, he's the foggiest idea what's happening. Because he is passing the text, but he has no sense of community, no understanding of what it means to bleed with other people. What it means to be community. You start digging what Jesus is saying when he says, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friend. Now the question is, how many of us live in community with each other on this campus where you're prepared to lay down your life for other people? Now it's a tough time to understand community because you see, at the stage we're in right now, it's very tough. Because that period between 16 and 21 and 16 and 23 is really a tough period. Tough period. Because all kinds of things are happening to us all at the same time. During that period of time is the period in which you and I are the most insecure. The most insecure. It is also that period of time that we're moving out of childhood into adulthood. And so the pains of moving in that vein are very tough. It's even further toughened by the fact that we have more knowledge than any generation before us. So that in terms of head knowledge, we are 20 and 40 years ahead of where our parents were at that age. We're even ahead of them now in terms of knowledge, but emotionally we're still children. And that's painful. It's also the period of time that our sex drives are heightened. And it's also the period of time in which we discover the opposite sex. So all that's happening at the same time. Our sex drives peak. We discover the opposite sex. We're the most insecure. The pains of growing out of childhood to manhood and womanhood. All that's happening to us at the same time. And we don't know how to handle it. We don't know what to do with it. So what happens out of this insecurity on most religious college campuses, what happens is when we arrive in our freshman year, probably late in our freshman year, especially if you're a female, you get hooked on to one guy. And you date him all the way through school. Because there's some strange thing on religious college campuses about dating other people. Grab hold of one cat and you stay with him. Permanently. My guy, you know. First time you go out on a date, you're married, man. Married. You got sex. And don't hold hands, it's all over there. Because of this insecurity, we need to grab hold of somebody and boom, that's it. Permanent relationship. And the people who date more than one person, there's something wrong with that guy. You know, that's the second girl he's been out with this semester. There's be something wrong with it. Because we get tied down and locked in, because it never occurs to us that one of the greatest opportunities you have now is the opportunity to meet many different people. And most of you don't take that opportunity. You grab over one person and go off in your own little corner and create your own little world. But what's going to happen is that when you get out of here, you're going to be going with each other for so long until you're going to feel guilty if you don't get married. And then you get married without ever having been exposed to any other people. And then your marriage becomes a hell on earth, because you don't know how to relate to each other. And if you come out of a religious bag, you feel you got to live with it because your religious convictions teach you that there's something wrong with divorce, and you stay with it. And then you drag your children into it, and then they grow up the same way. And it's just perpetuated from one generation to another because people don't know how to have community. They don't know how to relate. And do you know that some of the of the worst married relationships going on in this country today, and many homes that are literally experiencing hell are the religious homes. The homes where people claim to be religious but have no sense of what it means to be committed to each other. And now they're at the point where they tolerate each other for the religious front that they must put on, but they don't really know what commitment is. What does it mean to live? As I travel across the country, especially as I talk at high school campuses, it's very interesting when you have the opening exercises in the morning. Many schools still go through the thing of my country typically and salute the flag. And when they get to saluting a flag, it's very interesting to watch the hundreds of kids out there who don't salute the flag. Now, of course, their dumb teachers and parents think that they're anarchists. The kids aren't saluting the flag because they're un-American, the communists have gotten to them or something. But all the kids are saying, no, it ain't got nothing to do with being un-American or being anarchist. It's got to do with integrity. It's got to do with honesty. It's got to do with truth. And the kid honestly says, I have a problem standing up saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Kid looks around and says, we are one nation. 500,000 of my Indian brothers and sisters locked up on reservations, and this is one nation. This was once their country. They owned it. It was their land. They were raped, pillaged, shot, driven from their land, relegated to all kinds of conditions that are inhuman. The suicide rate among them is the highest in the nation. They died 28 years younger than most people in this country because of the sad conditions that they're living in. This was once their country. And after raping and pillaging and shooting them and doing them in, we have the nerve to stand up and say that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, and it wasn't them braves we were talking about. 25 million black people in this country with no real upward social mobility. They do not have the right to determine their own futures. They have no political or economic or educational control of their own communities. We are one nation. And the sad part about it is that most of us as students, we sit down and say, but Tom, we're different. That's our parents' bag. Our parents are bigoted and narrow-minded like that. They don't care about the Indians and the Chicanos and the blacks and other people of the third world. But us kids, you got to admit, we're making progress. We're different from our parents. And I say, You are no different. When your parents sat where you sat, right now they were as idealistic as you are and as apathetic as you are. And there's something that apathy does to idealism. The older you get, the more conformed to the system you become. And the system says you gotta make it, you gotta climb the ladder, you gotta move into a better neighborhood, you gotta make more money, you gotta get a better job. And to do all of that, the system says there's certain compromises you have to make. And before long, you end up prostituting yourself in the name of the mortgage and the car and all the rest. And where does that leave you? Just like your parents. It won't be long, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when you become middle America, when you become Nixon's silent majority, that you too will sit down and say, those Chicanos, and those blacks, and those Indians who just pulled themselves up out of the bootstraps the way I did, they too could succeed. If they just didn't lazy around and have all those illegitimate children and collect welfare checks and went out and worked hard, they too could stand on their own two feet. You'd be saying the same thing because you're no different. Because you and I, like our parents, haven't learned what it means to be committed to each other. You don't know what it means to be. I'm shocked, at one point I bought this thing which said, we are different. This generation is different. We are not like our parents. I at one point entertained that thought that it was possible. Until I started going around on college campus and I would stand up and I say, do you realize the immorality if we're living in community with each other? Do you realize the immorality of going and taking and dropping bombs on Vietnamese villages and wiping out kids and children and laying napalm on people? Do you realize how immoral that is? And I was surprised to start hearing this generation, the kids who were supposed to be the new generation, standing up and mouthing the same cliches. Well, the Word of God says be subject to the higher authorities, and if our government tells us to put napalm on people, we have to obey our government. Wow. Wow. Just how different then are you? If you say that greater love hath no man than this, and a man lay down his life for his friend, and the word of God says, if your enemy hunger, you feed him. Do good to those who despitefully use you, and then you're going to turn around and say, in the name of Jesus, it's all right to drop bombs on that man that God tells you to love. It's all right to put napalm on the man that God says feed. Then I say that you're wrapped up in the same kind of Americanistic religion that your parents have, and it's a religion that's got nothing to do with the religion of Jesus. Because the Jesus that leaps out of the pages of the New Testament isn't committed to putting napalm on people. Otherwise, the Bibles you and I are reading are awful different. What does it mean to be brothers? What does it mean to be committed to each other? The third issue is the issue of power, P-O-W-E-R. Once I find out who I am, and once I find out who my neighbor is and what my responsibility to other people is, where do I get the power to do it? It has never been a question in American society of our ability to decipher right from wrong. Most of us have the intellectual ability and a certain kind of ethical commitment to know what's right and what's wrong. The question is, once I find out what's right, how do I do it? If you go back to the very inception of our country and listen to our forebears who were prone to making very noble speeches about liberty and justice and freedom and tranquility and all those exciting things, you will find that they couldn't pull it off. And when guys like Thomas Jefferson got up and said all men are born created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those were nice, noble statements, but the guy couldn't do it. He couldn't pull it off. He might have even been sincere, but he couldn't do it. Take a fellow like Patrick Henry. Remember that time when the British were beating down the colonists' backs? And Patrick Henry got up and made that speech to incite a riot when he said, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Now I have no problem believing that old Pat Henry meant that. Give me liberty or give me death. Except he might have had his mind blown if 2 or 3 dozen of his slaves would have said, me too. Because you see, while Pat Henry was committed to liberty and justice for himself, he was not committed to his slaves. He didn't even have them in mind, because they didn't have the power, the ability to be. It is what that guy by the name of Paul, who lived about 30 years after Jesus, was trying to tell us when he said, in the 7th chapter of Romans, the will to do is present with me. The will to do is present with me. In my mind, I want to do the will of God, whatever that is. In my mind, I want to be all that God intended me to be. In my mind, I want to live according to the standards of God. But he said, how to perform that which is good, I cannot discover. I find that which I don't want to do, I do. That which I do want to do, I don't do. I find another law, that when I would do good, evil is present with me. I don't have the power to be. And then he cries out, he says, oh, what a messed up man I am. Who will deliver me from the body of this death? And it is reputed that during this day in the Roman Empire, when a man committed a murder, they finally caught up with him, they chained him back to the dead, stinking corpse of the man he killed. And he literally had to carry on his back the dead corpse of the man he murdered until somebody liberated him. And what Paul is saying is, I've got a dead man on my back. That every time I would try to be what God wants me to be, there's something that drags me to the common level. There's a dead man in me. It's what the drug addict calls the monkey on his back. And every last one of us have got a monkey on us. It won't let us be what we ought to be. And Paul is saying, who in the world is going to set me free? Who's going to deliver me? Who's going to give me the power to be what I'm supposed to be? See, the one great problem with the idealist in American society is that he has these great noble ideals, but he doesn't have the power to execute it. And the frustration of both the liberal and the conservative is that the liberal is a cat who's got great ideals, man. And if you ever found his ideals, you wouldn't be too far wrong. His analysis of the society and his hopes and dreams are fantastic, but he's got no power to do it. The tragedy of the conservative that he's so insecure, so he commits all of his energy to maintaining what is. So both of them are messed up because neither one of them have either got vision or power. And so what needs to emerge is somebody that's neither conservative nor liberal, but who's plugged into a whole new thing. So our society came up with a couple of solutions to the problem. First solution, they said, was education. All we have to do is produce a more informed society, and that would solve our problem. And so we went on this great rampage to educate our society. In 1957, when the Russians put the first Sputnik into space, or the first satellite into space, America got uptight because we were behind scientifically, and we said we got to beef up our education system. And so we started allocating a little bit more money for education because we had to get to the moon and produce the technologists to make us numero uno. We are now the most informed society in the history of man. Information in our country now doubles every 6 years. 10 years from now, we'll double every 3 years. Last semester's textbook is already obsolete this semester because of the fantastic increase in knowledge for various subjects. But with all of our information, has it brought us together? Are we any more committed to each other? Are we prepared to lay our lives down for each other, to look out for each other, to be sensitive to each other's needs? So the second solution they came up with, and keep in mind when you deal with education, is you gotta define education either according to its correct definition or according to the institutional definition. The institutional definition of education is really indoctrination, not education. And that sincerely, in most education systems, the reason that people go to school is for the purpose of learning how to serve the present system. Nobody's teaching you how to change the system. They're teaching you how to serve what already exists. And to show you that they don't intend for you to try to change the system, they always will counteract by saying, well, yeah, things are really bad, but after all, we are numero uno. Yes, America does have its problems, but think about countries like Russia, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, those communist countries where people don't have any liberty at all. Things are horrible here, but at least it's better than the rest of the world. And see, that's a clever way of saying, leave it the way it is. That's like saying the rest of the world has 98% cancer and we only have 94% cancer. So that makes us better off. Don't you understand that both of you are dying? Leave it the way it is. And so you're being educated to go in and serve the present system, not to change it. Now, the other very clever means is you see, and I understand that because I'm chief executive officer of my company, see? So I know the management process. And so whenever some young Turks in my organization want to change something, you see, I have a way of cooling them by sitting them down and meeting and saying, gentlemen, there is a way to change things in this organization through orderly, systematic methods. Now, if you want to change things at Tom Skinner Associates, you must do it through the existing system. The problem is, I got it set up that the existing system is me. And so I got a clever way of making sure that nothing really changes. And I tell them that if you go through normal channels, and normal channels is me, I got to make the decision. And I've already made up my mind I'm not going to change. And so we're all prepared that way, not to really change anything. Don't really change nothing. Leave it the way it is. It's the best system in the world. And so there's a difference between education and indoctrination. That is why, to get through the education system today, all you have to do in order to get through school is just pass the test. Just pass the test. That's all you got to do. You don't really have to be educated. Just pass the test. That's why when exams are over and the exams are given back after class, everybody goes around and says, what you get? What you get? Hey, what you get, man? Because the test is the most important thing. Pass the test when you get through. You don't have to know anything, just pass. So they came up with a second solution. The second solution was economics. So all we have to do is produce a more economically affluent society, and that will solve the problem. Has it? We're wealthy, but not together. And the third solution they came up with was religion. Good old Americanized religion. God, country, mama, the girl back home, and apple pie. We wrapped God up in the American flag, and we made him chairman of the Republican Party, head of the Joint Chief of Staff, and president of the New York Stock Exchange. Jesus Christ became super capitalist extraordinary, and a vote for America was a vote for God. God is on our side. And those are the people who put those bumper stickers on their cars, one on one side of the car which says America, love it or leave it, and the other one which says God and country. And I'm suggesting that if you're really digging God, that maybe you ought to change those stickers, and one sticker ought to be America, love it, and change it. And the other sticker ought to read God or country. So God and country.
Because to suggest that God runs this country puts God in a very precarious situation. Because if God runs America, that makes God my enemy. It means that God is participating in a systematic attempt to eliminate Chicanos and Indians and black people from having anything to do with decision-making process in this nation. It means that God ordained slavery and segregation and dehumanization, that God is polluting the air, that God creates wars, and that God is committed to the profit system at any cost. That makes God my enemy. If God's really running this. The greatest news that ever hit me was that God doesn't run this country. That God is not an American any more than he's a Russian. God's not a communist any more than he's a capitalist or a socialist. That God's not a Democrat any more than he's a Republican. That he is the Lord of heaven and earth who's come to do a whole new thing. And you see, here I was on this maddening search trying to find out who I was. And I lived on a block in Harlem where there were 4,000 people on my block. Not in my neighborhood, on my block. What's the population of Augsburg College? 1,600. That meant that you could take the population of Augsburg and multiply 2.5 times and put it on my block. 43% of the kids in my neighborhood grew up born out of wedlock, and 57% grew up without their fathers, producing what the sociologists call a matriarchal society, which very simply meant that the kid's old man wasn't home. And in the middle of all that, I'm trying to find out who I am. I knew I was black, I knew I lived in a black community, but nobody ever told me what that meant. And so like a great number of people, I went on this maddening search to discover myself, to find out who in the world I was. I got nowhere. I turned on television to try to find something on TV that said that's me. There was nothing. I take that back. In those days, there was Rochester. When I went to first grade, they gave me a grade 1 reader, and I went thumbing through that to find something in the reader that said that's me. I can relate to that. And we had these stories when I was in first grade about Dick, Jane, and Sally, and a dog named Spot who said bow wow. You kidding? Are you trying to tell me that they still use Dick, Jane, and Sally?
Yeah, but they have black friends.
Well, you see, when I was in school, Dick was white, Jane was white, Sally was white, with the exception of Spot. They integrated. And I got the strange feeling that I had been left out, that not even the education system considered me important enough to deal with me in their own books, in their own literature. And you look at all the religious stuff. Now you take, even you super religious people, who go out and pass out your tracts, trying to save folk and all that stuff. Look at the stuff, the literature you use. And all the people that God saved are white. God doesn't save Chicanos, Indians, blacks, just white folks. So that white people become God's answer to everything. And so you grow up feeling, well, man, whose side is God on? And then before long you discover that they honestly have painted Jesus as white. Jesus comes across with blonde hair, blue eyes, and regular features. Those nice soft hands as if they've just been washed in Dove or something. And as a black kid, I said, how in the world can I relate to that kind of Jesus? That he wouldn't even survive in my neighborhood. We would do him in on any street corner. We wouldn't have to wait until after dark. They told me he was the savior, and my reply was that I would have to work full-time saving him. He wouldn't survive. Well, a magnificent thing happened one night. By this time, my life had become kind of violent. I ended up with 22 notches on the handle of my knife, which meant that my blades gone into the bodies of 22 different people, and I didn't care. I could bust a bottle across the guy's head and be undisturbed about it, take the bottle, break it in half, shake the glass in his face and twist it, not even bat my eye. I had 129 guys in the gang eaten out of my hands, out of the gang that I led, and what happened didn't make any difference. And keep in mind, I was a good kid. I went to church every Sunday. I was president of the young people's department in my church. I went through all the motions. I'd run with the guys on Saturday night, break in and steal, and get up in the church choir on Sunday morning and sing All Hail and Bow in Jesus' name. Until one night, quite by accident, I heard a very simple message by radio. I was mapping out strategy for a gang fight. And the guy started rapping from a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, that says, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things become new." And he went on to say that every person born into the human race is born without the life of God, and it is the absence of God's life in a person that causes a person to be what the Bible defines as a sinner. Now, I'd always been told that sinners were bad people. You know, the people who lied, cheated, gambled, steal, went to movies, nightclubs, and wore miniskirts. But here was a guy who was saying that has nothing at all to do with what sin is. Sin is separation from God. Sin is the absence of God's life. And he said that every person born into the human race is born without the life of God. And by not having God's life in him, he's not a whole person. And it's this lack of wholeness that produces the messed up society. People are not whole people. And I was told that the whole reason that God became a man in the person of Jesus Christ was to show me what a whole person looked like. And for the first time it was communicated to me that if I wanted to know what man was supposed to be like, I had to check out Jesus. And if I want to know what God is all about, I've got to check out Jesus. And I discovered that Jesus Christ was both the truth about God and the truth about man. If I wanted to know what God was like, I had to check out Jesus. If I wanted to know what man was supposed to be like, I had to check out Jesus. The most exciting thing I was told was that he came not only to demonstrate a lifestyle that can become mine, but he came to take my place, the messed up person I was, to experience the hell I deserved for being an unwhole person. I was told that when Jesus Christ was nailed to the cross 1900 years ago, it was not just another religious leader being nailed to the cross, that Jesus Christ was being nailed upon that cross to forgive me for what I was. And I was told that 3 days later he arose again from the dead, not just to prove that he had power of death, but to live his resurrected life in me. It was the first time it had ever been communicated. You know, I've been to church and heard all that stuff, but it had never been communicated to me before that Jesus Christ was where it's at. And I prayed a very simple prayer, in which I said, God, I don't dig you, I don't understand you, but I know I need you. And I invited this person into my life. I know who I am now. I'm God's son. My commitment to you is that I'm prepared to love you at any cost. I do not require that you love me back. I don't mix love up with mushrooms. Because I love you doesn't mean I will let you walk over me. Because the person who walks over me is not only dehumanizing me, they're dehumanizing themselves. And I love them too much to let them dehumanize themselves. But I am committed to you. And I've got the power to be that because Christ is alive in me. And that's the point that I want to start rapping with you about how Jesus Christ now makes a difference in the issues. And we've got to grapple with it. I'm getting it together. And the most exciting thing that I know and I can tell you is that this person, Jesus Christ, is alive with me and he's my point of reference. And I'd like to spend the rest of the week telling you how he's the point of reference and how he can be your point of reference. Let's pray. Father, thanks for this time together. We pray as a result of what we've heard that none of us will leave this place the same. Help us to be honest about where we are. And help us as we wrap together in these days to come. Find out how you can deal with the issues that all of us must deal with in these terrible times. Help us not dismiss you as just some religious leader. Help us to work through the practical solutions that you are to the issues that we have today. We ask it in Jesus' name.
Those of you who are interested, in 5 minutes, we'll meet over at the Alumni Lounge to wrap.